Vostok too. Don't worry, you can always come back and forth. So now we're going to go to the next activity.
Yes, so after this amazing discussion with our three panelists on the workshop 3, 2, 1 and lift off, we'll go from ground to orbits with our guests and who will be interviewed. She's Charlotte Beskow. She's the head of the Space Transportation Office at Kourou in French Guiana, with the representing the European Space Agency. And she should appear
soon, but don't worry.
On
in the
screen.
meantime, okay. So in the meantime,
I can hear you. If it's any consolation.
Okay. Could you turn on your camera on, please, Charlotte Beskow?
Camera is on.
Camera is on.
Okay.
Yeah, the camera is on.
So let's wait a few seconds before. Yes. So.
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, please. Sorry, Charlotte Beskow, if you're hearing us, can you please try again?
You go disconnect and reconnect.
There might be some technical
And I'll
issue.
turn it on again. But whoever is managing the little screen.
Okay, she's here. Sorry for this. Things of life have always. So please, we apologize for this, Charlotte. Can you hear us now?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect.
Yes, perfect.
So she's here. That's great. Thank you so much. So great to have you on board on our space journey. As we discussed this morning, space debris orbiting is a major issue for space access, and the majority of these are either small debris from inactive satellites or other type of small objects, but there's also larger space debris. So we would like to know how, some of these large debris can be launchers from Ariane 5. Oh, we can see you already. Hi. So some of these larger debris are actually from launchers. How is it handled for missions, for example, in Ariane 5 first stage? How do you handle the danger that large debris from launchers can cause to normal operation of different missions? Over to you, Charlotte.
Let me first say a few words about debris, because it's a very interesting topic and a very important topic. There is every day thousands of objects that hit the Earth, and they come from outer space. And in general, they burn up on reentry and do not cause much harm, but they are a risk to any satellite in orbit. They're a risk to the space station. And of course, when you're launching something into space, you have to take these objects into account. There is a worldwide network that tracks all these objects, and NASA is the main partner of this network, but the European Space Agency is now also starting initiatives in this area. And they keep track of at least 20,000 objects. If we look at the space station, for example, the space station is in low Earth orbit. It's only about 350 to 450 kilometers from the Earth's surface. And a lot of effort goes into keeping the station safe. That means having to move it out of the way in case debris comes along. In terms of launching, it's something that we have to bear in mind. But the Earth is quite large and the atmosphere is quite large. It doesn't really impact our activities as such. Part of it is natural, part of it is man-made. And what we're seeing now is a growing phenomena of the new type of communication constellations. Previously, we used to put large satellites into geostationary orbits, and they could weigh maybe 3, 4, 5 tons. And they would go to 36,000 kilometers away from the Earth in a stable position. And they would stay there for maybe 20 years. And at the end of the lifetime, they would be bumped up to a graveyard orbit. The new idea is to have thousands of small satellites orbiting in a much, much lower altitude. And if we look at Elon Musk alone, he has authorization to put up 13,000 satellites. And this is a trend that's only just beginning. It's already creating havoc for the astronomers who are finding all these objects polluting the night sky. And it's something we're going to have to deal with in the future.
Yes, that's definitely a major issue for an issue we have to deal and a challenge for the next years. And we are actually glad to be able to work on this in our future career. And so, yeah, to come back on the recent events. So last month, a Chinese Central Core of a March 5 rocket, Long March 5 rocket, fall down on Earth and re-enter in the atmosphere. And as it has only 1 hour and a half to do all the rounds, all the orbits, and we have some uncertainty of on the timing where it re-enter into the atmosphere. Like we never know, no one's really knows when and where is where about to fall. And so when we're launching from French Guiana, how is it managed? Like, do we know exactly when the launcher body parts are going to fall, or it's something we don't really control?
You cannot control these things because these are, by definition, uncontrolled orbits. When we do controlled re-entry, it's a different matter. When we launched the ATVs, for example, at the end of the ATV lifetime, ATV was a cargo vehicle that went to the International Space Station. At the end of its 6-month stay at the station, we made a controlled re-entry, which meant we knew exactly where we were going to put it, and we issued NOTAMs to air traffic control and to maritime control. And we targeted a specific place in the Pacific on the southern latitudes in an area which is not frequented. So this is the policy that most spacefaring nations use when bringing something back on purpose. Now, the incident with the Chinese is by definition uncontrolled. So all you can do is monitor, calculate, and make your predictions. That's all you can do. But again, I mean, space is large, and the likelihood that something will actually be in the vicinity of a launch at the moment, at the exact second that we're going to launch, is not really all that great. But we do take it very seriously. And all this data is pooled worldwide. And so frequently in French Guiana, we are called upon to contribute by being asked to monitor a passage of a suspected object, for example. And then we can use our radars to do that. And then we contribute that information to the next station downstream. So it's a very good example of global cooperation in the space area.
Thank you. Sorry, I was muted. So as you said, space is very hard, and there's some events that cannot be controlled. Also, there's the fact that launchers are extremely explosive and that they're going at very high speeds. So as you said, from Kourou, you're able to help monitoring these events, but I was wondering how else is the local population at Kourou or in Simari protected from these unfortunate events that are not supposed to happen but may happen?
Yeah, well, we take safety extremely seriously. Now, you have to bear in mind that French Guiana is an ideal place to launch from because it's close to the equator. And if you look at a globe, and you almost have to look at the real globe, you can see that we have a huge expanse of water to the east and another huge expanse of water to the north, which allows us to go into globally any orbit that we need to go. The trajectory of the launcher is planned so that to keep the populations of Kourou and Sinnamary safe. Sinnamary is more a question of if we're launching to the north, otherwise they will not be in the vicinity of the launcher. And Kourou, Cayenne, of course, if we're launching towards the east. The launch pad itself is about 16, 17 kilometers, depending on which launcher we're using, from the town. So it's quite a safe distance. There are no special restrictions for the actual launch, but like I said, the trajectory is calculated bearing in mind all possible cases of known credible failure scenarios. So in case there is an explosion, where will the debris fall? This means that we monitor the winds very, very carefully. We have several wind meters stationed on ground level, on masts, and close to each of the launch sites, depending on which launch site we're using. And there are strict limits to how much the wind can be at any given time for the launch, and also on the direction. So the go or no-go is a combination of force and direction. In addition, we have to monitor the winds at altitude. It's not enough to know what the wind is at ground level. That's quite easy. But we have to know what the wind is at altitude. And for this, we use sounding rocket balloons equipped with GPS receivers. And so we launched several of these balloons at set intervals before liftoff. And the data is transmitted by the GPS receiver. So it transmits its location. The calculations are made to develop a wind profile. The data is fed into models, and we use both a European model and we use a French model, and now we're also using an American model for added confidence checking. And we do a profile up to, I think, 30,000. Well, I can't remember the exact height, but quite high.
Yeah.
And this takes a bit of time. So this is why we sometimes get a very late negative launch, because we do want to give ourselves the opportunity to launch, but we do not take any risks.
Yeah, for sure. Like we never know when the launch is going to happen, because still the rocket in the ground, we never know what happens. So for safety, we totally understand that we prefer to make sure every parameter is on green so that we can launch. And so to mitigate this risk of failure, so as you said, the spaceport is monitoring the weather, the winds in both low altitude but also high altitude to make sure nothing is going to fall back on the wrong place. And so my next question is, how do you perform a launch campaign, and how do you use the launch campaign to mitigate the risk of a launch failure? And yeah, if you could explain to the audience how a launch campaigns works.
We have to separate. It's not a launch campaign. If we have to be complete, there are 3 launch campaigns. There's one for the satellite, because the satellite has its own launch campaign. For some satellites, it's simply a transport integrity check, perhaps fueling, to make sure everything's okay, and then they can put it on the launcher. Other satellites arrive and they still need to do some integration and sometimes even a bit of testing before they can be placed on the launcher. So this is the satellite's life, and it lives its own life. The launcher is a different matter, but you have to bear in mind that the entire launcher manufacturing process is carefully quality controlled according to the set procedures that have been developed over the last 20 odd years. And there's a careful quality control, there's testing, there's analysis of the test results to make sure that manufacturing and the procedures have been followed. When the launcher arrives, it is in bits and pieces, and it is assembled, and the various engines, pyros, etc. are integrated. And again, all this follows a standard set of procedures with quality controls, etc. We do several launch readiness reviews, and the final of those is at L-3 for an Ariane, L-2 for a Vega, I believe. And at that point, we go through any NCRs, any non-conformance reports, anything that casts any doubt over the success of the mission, because it's not only a matter of avoiding an explosion. Of course, we don't want our launches to explode, and luckily it seldom happens. But we really want our mission to be a success. And a delayed launch is really not an issue, unless you're going to a comet, in which case you can't delay. So if there's any doubt, any reasonable doubt, it's better to delay, cross-check, run another test. A delay in the end doesn't really matter. The important thing is that the launcher with its precious cargo lifts off and arrives, and the cargo arrives at the destination. At the same time, the third campaign that's going on is the preparation of the launch base. This is the preparation of the telemetry stations, the radar tracking stations, the final mission analysis, the control that the mission trajectory satisfies all the constraints. The flight safety people do all their simulations with the specific trajectory of the actual launch. They practice any kind of credible, or sometimes not all that credible, failure scenarios to make sure that they're on their toes. And there's a whole series of tests run, which include downrange telemetry stations. And we need the telemetry. We need the telemetry to monitor what's happening with the launcher and to monitor the satellization of the various stages. And so all this is gone through very, very carefully and very, very rigorously. And again, sometimes there are delays, and we always prefer to be safe rather than sorry. We never do anything in a hurry.
I think it's quite clear that due to the high complexity and high risks that are involved, even though you do your best and plan ahead and prevent all of this with the study, with a very thorough analysis of all of this, there's still some things that can go wrong, of course. So it's good to know that all of these activities are very safe activity. As you have been explaining all of the process to launch a specific mission, I would like to actually ask you, since in the afternoon we're going to focus more on space exploration, I would like to wonder if there's any kind of difference between exploration missions and other missions in terms of launching in the process, or even just in terms of the excitement behind in the crew, and how does all of this work?
To be honest, I would say, even though we launched quite a few rockets, they're all unique, they're all different, and failure is always just around the corner, no matter what the mission. We're not yet in a production line where we're producing, hundreds of launchers and they're all carbon copies. Basically, they're all slightly different. They all have some kind of difference compared to the previous ones, or the payload is a bit different, or something has to be stretched, or something has to be increased to allow a heavier launch, or whatever. So they're all very, very different. But again, from a launcher processing point of view, the payload it carries, the payloads are usually passive during launch, it really makes no difference. It's like an airport, like an airplane. It carries a president, or it can carry a farmer. It doesn't make much difference to the airplane itself. It does make a difference to the orbital calculations, because these can be more or less complicated in terms of mission analysis. It can also make a huge difference in terms of where the separation is going to take place. It's always comfortable to use our standard network of downrange stations, but frequently, especially now, we have to resort to exotic stations or borrow stations from other space agencies. This was the case for one of the launches last year, where we used a station in Jeju in South Korea. And again, for ATV, which was also a complicated mission, we had to we rented a field in New Zealand and put a portable antenna there, because we needed telemetry at that particular point in time, and we had no ground station. So what is interesting really is the type of trajectory the launcher needs to take to deliver its cargo into orbit, and where the ground stations are available. Because as you can see from looking at the globe, most of the Earth is actually quite inhospitable and covered by ocean or mountains or other complicated areas. So it's hard to get a telemetry antenna at that point. We're investigating other ways, like using a space-based system, but we're not quite there yet.
Yeah, that's very interesting.
And of course, when we're going to launch Hubble this year, and that's going to be a huge, exciting mission. And there's going to be a lot of stress on that one because of the communication aspects, because of the high visibility, and because of the extremely precious cargo. So yeah, that will be an event to look forward to.
Yes, definitely in this October, I think, or maybe November. It's a huge launch that's pretty much everyone should be aware, because it will revolutionize the observation of deep space. So a lot of pressure, because it's a very expensive mission, and which will be a breakthrough for science and space exploration. And speaking about space exploration and critical mission, so 2 years ago I came in Kourou and I asked you the question about manned space flights from Kourou, and the answer were no, it's not in the perspective of ESA. But from 2 years ago to now, things maybe change a bit, and right now the European Space Agency is recruiting new astronauts for the next future mission. And does it maybe means that in the next years ESA will start having a launcher capable of manned flights, and will Kourou be adapted for that in, let's say, 10 or 20 years? This
is very much a political question, and you have to bear in mind that if you're going to launch humans into space, that's an enormous monetary investment. We have astronauts in space already today. We have flown astronauts for years, 20 odd years at least. And we fly them with our partners using their spacecraft. And that has worked out very well for the European Space Agency and for our astronauts and for the research that they do in space, because that is, after all, the purpose. If the political will is there and if the budgets are available, then there's no reason why Europe cannot develop a very successful man-rated launcher. Ariane 5 was close to being man-rated, but it was decided at the time not to go for that last step. But of course, I mean, Kourou and French Guiana would be a great place to do it from, if the political will and the budgets are available.
That totally makes sense. Actually, we had in our previous panel about space debris, we also mentioned these international policies and this coordination. So I want to take the question back and bring it on the table. In this time more related to the space exploration and this type of launches. Do you think, or obviously we know the European Space Agency collaborates with a lot of different stakeholders and has a lot of missions that are actually in coordination. But I would like to, if it's possible, if you could explain how does this coordination, how does this collaboration happen, and what are the most positive aspects and the most negative aspects of these kind of things? So maybe
how long do I have?
Oh, well, that's interesting. We have 10 minutes for this, so we want to ask you another final question, but you can take as much time as you need.
Yeah, just what I would like to say is that for anyone who has ever worked in a group project, you know that sometimes it can be a bit laborious, and you don't always have the same opinion, and sometimes you feel that, gosh, if I was doing this on my own, I could get ahead a lot quicker. But it's actually a false impression. We work very well when we work together. We avoid the common blindness that sometimes hits very homogeneous groups where we don't see the elephant in the room because we're not looking for it. So I would say working in an international cooperative environment is extremely rewarding, even if it does take a bit of effort. Before I came to French Guiana for the third time, I worked on the Automated Transfer Vehicle project, which was the cargo vehicle to the International Space Station. And the space station is where most of our astronauts, or all of our astronauts, are active. And it's a gigantic condominium, you could say. We're all shareholders in the space station. And since nobody ever has any money, not in the space industry either, or the space agency's lifespan, we all share, we do burden sharing and we do bartering. And this means that European astronauts fly on the space station because Europe has put up a laboratory and because Europe provided a cargo vehicle to the ISS. At the end of our cargo vehicle's lifetime, there was 5 of them, and the last one came down in 2015. Our contribution was changed, and we now are contributing the European service module to the new American launcher called SLS, who hopefully will do its maiden flight later this year. So it is a partnership. We have shared access to the station. We have shared access to the station resources. The Columbus lab is used partly by the Europeans, but also partly by our partners. And the main users of all this infrastructure is actually not the astronauts. You have to bear in mind that the astronauts are there to help, but the real users are the scientists and researchers across the world who have proposed experiments for use on the space station. And the astronauts help by installing the experiments, manipulating them, and frequently acting as guinea pigs themselves. There's a lot of testing on human bodies done on the astronauts themselves. I think my experience of working with the astronauts is that they are truly wonderful people. They work very well together, and they're very keen on this cooperative spirit between the Russians and the Japanese and the Swedes and the Germans and the Europeans and the Italians. And they trained together, their families lived together for a large part of the training period, because they understand that for an astronaut to function in space, everything has to work, both privately and professionally. It's not just another day in the office. There were times when I was working on ATV and when I was on console that one of the astronauts got fed up and they basically just took off his headset and walked away. And that was it. No more communication with him until he cooled down and came back. And so it's this richness in human exchanges is very, very good for all of us, and it has allowed us to do the space station. It has allowed us to keep the space station in service despite all the difficulties and all the failures we've had. We've been very lucky to have always been able to recover the space station from various failures, and that has always come because all the teams pulled together.
Yeah,
completely
definitely.
without any kind of competition, like we're better than you guys are. There was a bit of that maybe in the beginning, but I think today there's none of that. There's mutual respect and understanding for each other's skills, and I think that's wonderful.
And that's a good point. And also, like, we are happy here in Cranfield in our university, so we are part of Cransted, our student society, which is quite large with 100 members, and we have how much?
Over 25
Over 25
nationalities,
different nationalities and 12 different background of different backgrounds. So we are all working together for organizing this conference, but also working on hand-on projects. Like I'm working on a rocket, and like we are from all the background. And it's true that you don't just need to have good engineers, you need to have a good team that work together, and that's the key of all the projects. And I think in Cransted we really learn about this and how to work in a team spirit and with international partners, because as we said, we have.
And it's great to see that actually this feeling might be the feeling we get when we go to work, if we manage to work at ESA or this kind of other space agencies that collaborate together. So it's great to hear that.
Definitely. And so
it is fundamental. And in space, everybody counts. Down to, the cleaner is just as important, if not more important, than the manager. Because if there's a speck of dust on that little optical instrument, then somebody's going to be very unhappy at some point in time. So it's all about teamwork.
Definitely.
And everybody counts.
Yeah, for sure. Everybody, it's the same in our team right now for this conference. Like you see us, me, Alex and me, but we are dozens of students working like from everywhere for the other rooms.
And we also have the great studio from university that are very helpful.
Working.
They're celebrating now that we just gave them a quick hi.
Yeah.
So let's keep going with the interview.
And so we are about to finish this, and so quickly the last question, which is to me like the better one, the best one.
She already answered some of it.
Yeah, you already start to answer, but what is the best memory you have in one word of space, your life with space? And in one word, what's the word you would say for futures, for students and the future of space?
Future space is very bright, but it's a wonderful area to work in. You never get bored, and there's never a dull moment. There's always a new surprise around the corner. But you have to bear in mind that success is never, ever, ever guaranteed. No matter how hard you work, everything you put your life into might still blow up on you. So you need to have a private life as well. Yeah.
That's a very good point.
Yeah, and not what I was exactly expecting. So it's good, a surprise. I like it.
Yeah. So thank you very much, Charlotte, for joining us. It was amazing to be able to discuss with you from Kourou, from French Guiana at the spaceport. And so thank you very much for joining our Cransted Space Journey. I think everyone loved this talk. I loved it. I loved it too. So
Well, thank you very
again.
much.
And
It's a pleasure to be able to help.
Yeah.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you so much.
Now we're going for a long
Goodbye.
break.
Yeah.
So it's going to be, you want to introduce it or?
Yeah, I can introduce the
Go
break.
on.
So right now we will have the lunch break because I think everyone's like
We
to.
earn it, come on.
We need to have a lunch break, and so I will quickly go through the program of this afternoon. So we'll start it at 1:35, so in exactly 1 hour
And 1 minute.
in 1 minute. And so with launching with the Space Zero mission workshop from Cransets, presenting the projects, then the ISS workshop, ISS for
International Space Students or Station. Because
station.
We'll see.
We'll see. And then we'll go through talk given by Sylvain Lodjo, ERA spacecraft manager for ESA, followed by a talk from Jeff Delone, robotics technologist at NASA JPL. So if you like Mars and seeing helicopter on Mars, you
That's
shouldn't
your
miss
talk.
this one.
Yes. So, sorry.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I just jumped in. So we'll go then for the panel in future space exploration, and finally we will finish with.
With Houston, we have a problem.
So let's enjoy the break and see you soon.
See
Thank
you
you all for
soon.
joining. Bye.
Bye. And thank you.
Okay, good.